office about doing a power breakfast on AI, but we decided to wait till we could really have some local examples of companies that are employing AI, as opposed to a few years ago when it was more about the promise of AI. So today we have 3 companies represented on stage. I like to say kind of a small, medium, and large businesses representing 3 different industries. So I think we have a wide range of perspectives on how AI can be used. The premise I gave them was to assume most of the folks in the audience probably have dabbled in AI or have not used it very much. Obviously, some people here are already employing AI in their businesses, but we're going to cover a range of topics today, from kind of the basics on how businesses and individuals can just start to use AI for their companies and organizations, and then get into more in-depth some of the higher, more challenging things that these companies are already using it for, and what the possibilities are for the future. Text in your questions today. Again, in your program and in the CloudWise table tents is the phone number to send in your questions. We'll get microphones to as many people as possible. Make sure you include your name and table number when you send in your text in questions. First, I'd like to introduce the panel. To my immediate left is Ben Curran, the CEO of Vanica. Next to him is Morris Wynn, the founder and CEO of Predicate. And on the end is Donald Permazel, the VP of Data and AI at nCino. If we could please give them a round of applause. One interesting thing in my discussions with them preparing for this is there's not necessarily a clear definition of what AI is, and each of them said separately the definition of AI keeps changing. If you had asked them the question 2 years ago, it's a different answer than what they'd have today, and probably different than what they would have 2 years from now. So to set the stage, I asked them to kick it off with just defining what is AI today. So Ben, if we could start with you on that one.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. And it's a good question. I think the idea that there is one definition of AI, I think, is probably the core of that, is that it will keep changing over time, like anything. And so maybe I'll talk about, at least from my perspective, for just a minute, how that definition's changed over time. And we say AI a lot. I think that's in everyone's lexicon in this room at this point. But what is it? It's artificial intelligence, which is different than human intelligence, right? It's something that approximates that. So that's meant a bunch of different things over time. So I guess I'll just divide it up in a few areas real quick and then kick it to Morris and Donald. But pre-1950, like, no AI, right? Human intelligence only. To get stuff done, we had to think through it, we had to do it, we had to figure out what the next thing and take action. After that, call it 1950 to 2010, that's like automation, basic automation, things like assembly lines being automated. You have like a set of rules that software can start to say, if this, then that. You know, you can automate certain things. Maybe an automatic email reply is the simplest example that everyone can grasp. That's kind of, that happened in that era of automation between 1950 and 2010. Then starts to feel more like AI, call it 2010 to maybe 2022. Like the machine learning era. That's where these things start to feel a little more magical, and AI can learn, you know, that can learn from a set of experiences. So we probably all used Alexa or Google Assistant or Siri. Like that's interesting. That's this kind of next era of more learning involved. And then I think what we're starting to talk about now, and what we'll probably spend most of the time talking about, is like the big bang of 2022, where we all started saying AI every week for some reason. Which is like, that's generative AI, and it really starts to feel magical, right? It's the beginning of reasoning. It's AI starting to interact with us with natural language, how we interact with each other. We can start to have conversations with ChatGPT. They can help us write speeches, not just, you know, send automatic email replies. Like, it's pretty exciting. And I think that's the era that we're in right now. And to Rob's point, like, we're figuring out what that means day by day. And I'll preview what, and maybe we'll get to this later, but I think what we're most excited about and what I'm most excited about is, I think we're at the beginning of this next era of AI that a lot of you have probably started to hear the word agentic AI or AI agents. And I think we're flirting with the real beginning of that era, which is going beyond just being able to interact with us through natural language. It's being able to delegate really complex tasks and results in your intent, and having AI work tirelessly just like a human would to execute those results. So it's kind of like maybe a preview of the future. So that's my stab at kind of past, present, and where we're going in terms of what is AI.
All right. Morris?
Yeah, my definition of AI may actually change at the end of this talk. I don't know. It's pretty cool. So, as a physician entrepreneur, the world I live in is healthcare. I define AI not as artificial intelligence as the classic definition. I define it as augmented intelligence. Because in healthcare, it's critical that there's the human in the loop, that the machine learning algorithm that we're developing is there to augment the human clinical decision maker, to automate workflow processes, to make the doctor and nurses more efficient. So I don't envision, at least not in my lifetime, where we have a closed loop system. That would be really scary. I just came back from a critical care medicine conference just yesterday, and AI is the central theme. Everyone's talking about it. The elephant in the room for physician colleagues is, will it replace my job? The short answer is no, unless you're a radiologist, then you're in bad shape.
Really good at looking at X-rays. Yeah.
Right. Computer vision has gotten so good at looking at imaging, it's beaten the human counterpart. But it is something that healthcare is already known to be laggards in technology adoption. So AI is definitely one of those advances that it's going to take a minute to adopt. But the overall sentiment from the healthcare community is that this is here to stay. It's going to make our jobs better, our lives better as patients. And the way that I evaluate AI and kind of its, should we have it? We know we can. The question is, should we? And it has to check 3 boxes for me. It has to improve patient outcomes, it has to lower costs, and it has to make healthcare providers more efficient at what they're doing. And as we travel around the world through that lens and checking those boxes, we'll be fine. So that's how I define AI as it relates to healthcare, and I'm excited about the future, what we're creating.
Mm-hmm. So before we get to Donald, just to let you know, he's been with Encino for a while, but he just moved here from Australia 6 months ago, so we should probably give him a Wilmington welcome.
Thank you. Very glad to be here. Firstly, I think it's a really good question. As Ben mentioned, people have been talking a lot about AI ever since all the ChatGPT stuff hit, and indeed, for Encino, but for many other companies as well, all the service providers and everybody's talking about AI and how it's enhancing their services. And with that sort of level of excitement and attraction, you're seeing a lot of things fall under that AI banner, if you know what I mean. So much so almost that often you'll sort of see what someone's doing, and you're sort of having a look at it and drawing the exact dotted line back to the transformer and large language model developments that happened can be a little bit difficult. Having that said, I actually think that broader definition of AI and actually having it encompass quite a lot of things is a really good thing, because what I see is sort of traveling a little bit under the surface is with AI, we've seen the enormous development in technology. We're seeing that, sort of continuing to evolve and get more and more powerful almost week by week. But the bit that I think isn't seen as much, but is maybe even more powerful, is the cultural shift that we've seen happen in business and enterprise globally, where all of our customers, in banking and financial services and service providers and everyone else, are now taking a much harder look at their own business. And they're saying, what can I do with my data? Where is the value in my process? And what parts of this can I automate with AI and machine learning? So if a particular automation to get rid of some work or create a better customer outcome or more growth or what the case might be, if that particular automation doesn't use some whiz-bang giant large language model, which I love, by the way, I'm not having a go at them, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the seriousness with which enterprise is taking these new technologies. And I think that it's almost like a match made in heaven, that the technology is accelerating so quickly. Ben talked about the agentic stuff, and I guess sort of the width of value that these models can create. You've got that happening at the same time. You've got this sort of new desire, a new courage to embrace that technology from from within business. So it's an exciting time to be at work.
Well, I'd like each of you to take a couple minutes to talk about what your business is, in case folks here are not familiar with your companies, and then you have a bit of a different perspective. I'll have Ben and Donald start. So you are existing businesses. AI has come into prominence, and you've took existing processes and existing business and starting to use AI. Morris has a different perspective in that his entire company is based on AI. Wouldn't exist without the technology. So Ben, can you talk a little bit just about what Vanica does for folks that aren't familiar with it, and then how have you introduced AI into an existing company?
Absolutely. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Vanica is a property management technology platform. I think you could probably boil it down to that in its simplest form. So what the heck does that mean? Our customers are property management companies who manage at scale communities. So HOAs, homeowner associations, condominium associations, and then the homeowners and kind of vendor networks that serve those communities. So what we do for them is we provide a platform to make all that happen. So we're the general ledger accounting system of record. We are how homeowners make payments, how vendors get paid, how communications are dispersed, how internal workflows in those large complex companies are executed. We also connect with all of the banks that serve this industry and kind of are the conduit to move the money and understand kind of the financial management of those communities as well. And we do that across the country. So we're now the largest company in that kind of specific space. We manage over 5 million homes nationwide on our platform and connect with kind of all the major banks there and move billions of dollars of homeowner payments every year. And so to kind of get to part two of so how AI, we've been doing that as an enterprise system of record for years and years. And so how does AI come into our business? First, like all of you, we got curious late 2022 when we started using ChatGPT and other tools as consumers and said, hey, this is amazing as consumers. How can we provide this as builders for our customers? And as models started to improve, we were able to do more and more. And our first products were really aimed at helping to use these AI models to more quickly retrieve information and understand it and get work done. So instead of having to review 80 pages of documents of the rules and regulations for a community, you can just ask effectively a chat bot within Vanica, hey, what's the answer to this? How should we handle this? What's our policy on this? And instantly get an answer. Our kind of big moment, and that's been great. That's been happening for a couple years. We've been dripping that into our product everywhere. Our kind of big light bulb moment and kind of big bang moment for us was connecting with a really small startup out of Y Combinator, which some of you are probably familiar with in Silicon Valley, that was building a truly kind of agentic first, agent first solution focused in our space and building on top of our infrastructure. We ended up acquiring that company called HOAI this past year, and that's just accelerated by an order of magnitude our ability to get work done for our customers. So that truly kind of plugs an agent into all of our existing workflows and allows, instead of a human to have to push along a process, you can say, hey, I want these invoices to be received, coded correctly, and paid within X amount of time, and delegate that work to an agent to really get leverage on technology for our customers. So that's kind of been our journey so far, and it's evolving every day. It's exciting.
Can you talk about that invoices example that you told me about before, in terms of just I think
Sure.
Getting down to like the specifics of how this works?
Yeah, and this is just like, I think, good context, and again, I think what's interesting about AI, and we'll probably talk about this more, it's less about what it can do, and like a harder question asked is like, what can't it do today? And it's kind of bounded by our imagination and where we go do the work. So I'll use an example that probably makes sense for most people in this room, regardless of what industry you're in. If you think about what a property management company at scale will need to do, they manage hundreds of communities, hundreds of HOAs. They have all this work being done. Landscapers are doing work. You've got electricians, plumbers. You're paying utilities. You're receiving thousands of invoices a month, and you have to figure out, hey, what community is this for? Do they have the money in their bank account? What vendor? Is this a second invoice? Did they send us another invoice for the first half of the work? what general ledger, what GL should this be coded to? Can it get released for payment? Do we have to contemplate other invoices? Do we have the expense management going on? It's complicated, right? So I'll use an example of a customer we did a case study with last month. And this customer was receiving about 7,000 invoices a month for all of their customers, all of the communities that they manage. And they had a team of 6 people and one manager, kind of an accounts payable team. And their job was to receive these invoices, make sure they were scanned in. Vanica will OCR it, kind of read the invoice, make some assumptions about which vendors. Then they validate it. They go do some checks. They kind of do all this work, right? And eventually what happens is the invoices get paid. And they've got to go through that whole process. So they had a team of 6 people plus 1 manager, so 7 full-time employees doing that work in a given month. And it took them about 7 to 10 days, but an average about 8.5 days to pay an invoice is kind of their workload. And with an agent who could interpret all the rules and learn from the hundreds of thousands of invoices they've paid over the past few years in Vanica and what all the outcomes were, then we deployed an agent there, and the humans were able to just handle the exceptions where the agent would get stuck, which the agent handled over 95% of it within about a minute as they came in, and the humans handled that other kind of 5%. And what they ended up doing is the long leg was waiting for someone to say, okay, pay it, and took their payment time down from 8.5 days to about 2 days, and went from a team of 7 having to do it to 1 person handled those few exceptions, and everybody else could go spend time actually working with their customers and having human interaction rather than kind of being stuck in an office paying invoices. That was transformational for them, and that's just kind of a very narrow workflow, but that's kind of possible throughout the business.
Great. Donald, can you give a quick overview of Encino and then how you've implemented AI?
Yeah, of course, delighted to. So Encino, born in Wilmington, North Carolina, of course, out of Live Oak Bank some years ago, provides services to banks, initially in like loan origination systems for commercial banking, so where the bankers come in and want to decide and whether to give a loan in the commercial space, and collect all the documents and make the credit decision and all those parts of the value chain, but has now sort of expanded into retail banking, portfolio analytics services, which is sort of telling the bank how well their set of loans and assets and liabilities are performing. We do point of sale software for mortgages, so where the customers themselves go online or are able to apply for loans through our websites, as well as originate the loan itself. And but the thing Encino is probably famous for most, and something that I think about, which does I think relate to the AI question a little bit, is we're one of, if not the primary service provider in taking banking in America into the cloud. So by and large, so many banks in America, we've got a good sort of 300, 400 odd clients, would have all their software would be on premises in these big server rooms, and they'd have all that sort of maintenance and overhead and development cost to do it. So Encino, made that journey to jump with all these banks to go into the cloud, as I said. And I think that's quite important in the AI dimension, because something that people talk to me about, my customers, is AI is a domain where it sort of requires quite a bit of trust. It's a very new space. Banking is an extremely conservative environment, as you can imagine. And these, fundamental within the large language models that we're sort of talking about today in agentic AI, the underlying technology itself is non-deterministic. That means if you ask ChatGPT the same question 2 times, you don't get the same answer each time, okay? It's got randomness involved in the system. So that's something where in banking, it's quite a surprising thing. I've been working at the National Australia Bank for many years, and I know sort of the auditors come in, or Ernst & Young or whatever, and I want to see exactly why you're doing something every single time, and is it following the process, and can you demonstrate that for me? Moving into a world where we're talking about all this exciting technology, but you don't necessarily get the same answer each time, it's a strange thing. So in that world, my point is that what we see the market demanding is a lot of trust, right? You really need trusted partners who ain't going to muck it up when it comes especially to these emergent technologies. And I think Encino is really well positioned to do well in the AI space, because going from an on-premises server room with the software that runs your bank up into the cloud, that needs a lot of trust as well. And so that's why our company's taken this domain so seriously. We're making some big bets in the space, and yeah, we hope to deliver a lot of value for customers.
Great. So Morris says, as I mentioned, you're a little different. One, if y'all didn't catch it, Morris is a physician who has gone into technology and business. But two, unlike the other two companies represented here, your company only exists because of AI and is more of a startup. So can you first explain what your business does and then why it exists because of AI?
Yeah, Morse is different is a phrase I've heard a lot. And I like. So Predicate is pioneering a clinical reasoning and decision to support platform. There's a lot of words. And what does that mean? So I'm going to do something that I hate during large talks like this is by show of hands, who has consulted ChatGPT or Dr. Google for symptoms they've had and curious about what that could be? Yeah, a lot. Yeah, right. So then you take it to your doctor and says, "Doctor, I have this." And they said, "No, you don't." No, that only exists in sub-Saharan Africa. I guarantee you it does not exist in Wilmington, North Carolina. So the thing about AI for us in healthcare, and Rob is correct, there's some companies that use AI as part of their service offering to enhance an existing product. They change their algorithms, and AI is there to analyze a whole bunch of complex data and do it quickly and more accurately. What we're doing is we're building foundational models, and we are starting with building a predictive model for the onset of sepsis, the #1 kill in the world. And we do that through using two unique approaches. We're combining wearable sensors like your Apple Watches, your Fitbits, Garmin, Samsungs, Oura Rings, Whoops, all those things, streaming data from there as one part of the data that informs the algorithm. And the other one is through natural language processing. So based on what you report, you as the patient, your symptoms, report it to the algorithm. That does a temporal analysis through a time series, and it says, you're experiencing this symptom based on your wearable, you're saying these things together, that could mean something. So it provides a lot more contextual analysis to what you would normally go to a ChatGPT or a Google. And there's an interesting study actually done with ChatGPT. So it was published in JAMA end of kind of November, December 2023. And it was out of Beth Israel, a deaconess up there in Boston. They took 50 resident and attending physicians, randomly chosen, and they gave them 6 case studies. These are actual patient cases. And there were 3 arms to the study. It was with physicians who didn't have AI tools like ChatGPT. There was another one that did have access to AI tools. And then there was a third one, it was just ChatGPT by itself. And they said, here are 6 cases. You tell me what the diagnosis is and give your reasoning to get to that diagnosis. And you may be surprised to hear, or not, that ChatGPT alone got 90% of those cases correct. The doctors that used ChatGPT, they were prompted, the chatbot, to ask questions. They got it 76% right. And the ones who didn't use any tools at all got 74% right. So what does that tell us? Does it tell us that we should abandon all doctors and believe just our ChatGPT? No, absolutely not. Not at all. I'm sure we'll talk today about hallucinations and things that were brought up. But what we're doing is it's taking information real time and analyzing it and being able to come with a confident diagnosis. ChatGPT is not going to get FDA cleared. That's not going to happen. So there's a higher bar that needs to be put there. And that's what we're doing. Is we're developing a platform that meets the high standards and high benchmarks to be able to provide an informed diagnosis for our doctors.
Great. We'll take the first audience question. Matthew, table 32.
Good morning. Matthew Coleman with CAP3. I want to thank you guys for sharing this morning. This has been fascinating so far. But my question was around So we're in an age of new and next, and all these things are coming out so quickly. I was curious if you have a process or any kind of recommendation for vetting things that come out, new applications, to decide if this is something that you could actually use or if this new thing might just be noise.
Yeah, so, well, very, very good question, firstly. Yeah, look, testing and vetting is absolutely key. And indeed, like, obviously nCino's sort of a software provider, and, we've got data science teams and all this sort of thing. But as before adopting any new technology, we've got very rigorous statistical sort of, test bed technology that we do to evaluate the performance of, whether a predictive model or a generative AI system. I mean, I think in general, the key is, it goes back a little bit to what I mentioned before around trust. I think if you find and you're accessing those providers that are absolutely, at the leading edge, your Anthropics, you're hosting on AWS and these sorts of services, what you're going to do is you've got a little bit of a level of assurance as to the performance of the system just by virtue of the fact that, they're servicing so many customers, they're so well known. But the beauty of partnering that fashion as well as getting the benefit of the AI in the way that you're using it, and perhaps the confidence that it's going to do what it needs to do, you're also actually connecting yourself into all the future developments in the data science associated with that service. So when you go and you might maybe you're sort of integrating like the Claude model into your business in some fashion. It's very likely that it's integrated in such a way that as, in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, when this, technology continues to get more and more powerful, you continue to reap those benefits. So in short, I think, yeah, be careful. You get a lot of protection from going with really highly trusted providers. And if you're able to, any sort of, statistical testing that you can do of the service itself is a wise move.
I would say that, so trustworthy AI is a hot topic, and it's something that's something, again, seeing through the lens of healthcare and no other vertical. But trustworthy AI has to be accurate, has to be explainable, and that's something maybe we can get to, is what explainability means in AI. It has to be auditable, and it has to be bias aware, and it has to, for us, has to align with the medical best practices and evidence-based medicine. So there's a higher bar that we look through, and if you're looking at from a third party, not developing your own foundational models, I would say look at the history of that, because if it's with AI, it's extremely important that data pre-processing, or we've heard the expression garbage in, garbage out. There have been examples of bad AI outputs without an audit trail, no data lineage, and it just, because it started from a biased or just bad data set to begin with. So that's what I would say when vetting AI-based technology, is look at that history.
I'll start by echoing. Like, I agree with everything that Donald and Morris both shared. I think I'll offer maybe a kind of an additional perspective on that, or maybe a different look at it. And it's like when vetting technology, I think it's one thing to say, hey, I'm going to employ this in this way, and here's, it's a choice between these things. But I think for most people in this room and for most businesses today in 2025, it's, hey, can I use this? Is it helpful? Like, is it real, or is it just, does it just seem cool? I think that's a question that most people ask. And what I'd suggest with that is that, and this is something we've talked about with our team recently, think more about AI as you've hired someone onto your team who is wildly intelligent and incredibly capable and has deep domain knowledge and is going to work 24/7, 365. And so if you give them a task and you don't get it back, you don't get the work product you want back the first time, like, would you just say, like, that was a bad hire if that was the case? Or you'd say, maybe I should, like, provide different context and change the way that I'm approaching this problem? And think about it like that. It's like, maybe I should change my approach a little bit, or think through this a little more. And I think that's a good context to just think about, should we use this, a product or a technology, or lean in here? And I think something that we talk about and that I believe is the limit to what AI can do today, and certainly as we kind of look down the road and into the future, it's more limited by, are we being ambitious enough of what we're asking or what we're expecting, AI can do for us? Do we have the patience to take the time to like give the right context and understand what's possible and learn of the risks and the rewards and all those things? And then can we really clearly articulate what we want done and work with AI to do that? So that's kind of maybe a different perspective on the question.
I think that's a really good point, and it's one that we talk a little bit about internally as well. As we're applying these technologies into banking, a question that comes up a little bit is, should we work on sort of automating the the process as stands? Should we improve the way we're doing things currently and get rid of steps there to release time and etc.? Or should we actually change the way that we think about it entirely? And given the technology, we almost start with a blank page and we say, what's the best way to solve this problem in light of AI?
So just candidly, I think that's the great balance, and at least for us, the answer's got to be both. Because while we may look at it and say, hey, from a technological perspective, all these workflows, all these steps, like this is built around the limitations of how a human can interact with a computer, and all these things. And like there's a better way to do these things, but I think the long pole in the tent in terms of how this is going to change how work gets done is probably not a technology limitation or a model limitation. It's a humans changing behavior. And so it's both. Like our approach is both. It's like, one, give people the tools they need to be great today and to have superpowers they never thought they could have, but also contemplate this future where there's all these limitations that how we get work done today that just aren't going to be limitations when we look a couple years down the road.
Yeah, well, we're doing the same thing. We're placing a little bit of a bet each way, and I think it's very interesting that the thing that really resonated especially with me with that was when you talk about that sort of shift in human behavior. So just a really obvious example, but it's my field, but when you're talking about banking and you're looking at like originating a loan or overseeing a portfolio, a lot of these agentic flows, just sort of by their very nature, you've essentially like got a state machine navigating a graph and potentially hitting models or hitting integrations at various points. It sort of naturally relates to like a chat interface. So like the banker, instead of originating the loan the proper way and going through the system and doing all these things, they can just do it in chat, and the agent's going to take over and do little bits here and there and there. But it's very much, it's a little bit of a human behavior question. You know what I mean? Like how much is the industry going to adopt this new way of working? And with that question, it's actually a fair bit of uncertainty. So saying, right, let's take the world as it is at the moment. Let's get rid of the pain in the process. Let's get the cost of originating a loan down, et cetera, and just do the stuff in front of you. But then also always keeping one eye on the future a little bit for just different ways that work will happen in the future.
Can you all talk in terms of how workplace is changing? Can you talk about software development and how AI is already impacting that in your organizations, or how you expect it to?
Yes, well, funny you should mention that. I just came out of a couple of internal 2-day workshops internally where we're looking at exactly that question. Look, I mean, what's the short answer? The short answer is like accelerating. Like the pace of software delivery is getting a lot quicker. This might sound slightly cheeky or controversial, but it's relatively easy for us, and I think other companies as well, to access that, right? So we've got, like, for instance, at nCino, like, just some random example, but to pull numbers out of tax statements, so someone wants a loan and they give you a tax statement and you want to automatically get the number out, we would have invested, and it's now, like, out in the wild, like, so it's in prod, but we would have invested, sort of 12 months of, like, a whole bunch of PhDs, fine-tuning some enormous model to get, the sort of level of accuracy we needed to do it well. It's just a really, really hard task that costs a lot of money to get right. So, like, as relates to the question though, like sort of accessing AI to like improve how quickly we do our business, it's a snap. There are all of these platforms out there that can do things like, well, like obvious ones are like, generate code from natural language, that's all relatively trivial, and it's just getting better and better each month. But some of the ones that have been even sort of a bigger deal than that have been on the innovation and like prototyping front. So with some of the leading technologies, and I think my view is Anthropic, I think, is leading the pack, to go from someone who's just got a great idea, right? So in the past, they might have made some scribbles in notebooks and all this sort of thing, and maybe they did the design in MS Paint or something. Nowadays, what you can do is even a product manager who doesn't even know how to program can actually go all the way through these technologies to have like a little baby website they can stand up and you can click through that actually works. Oh, and it's basically on the web. So just the speed of getting ideas out there has been the big acceleration. And if I sort of have any sort of tip or insight, it's a little bit like the previous conversation. We're just like the way of working with these technologies is a slightly different way of working than you would previously. It's a slightly different mindset. And when I think about nCino, some people who work at nCino are actually going to like be really good at the new way of working, and some are going to struggle a little bit. So it just changes the profile a little bit, as technology always does.
Morris?
Yeah. Well, my comment is that, so we're a startup on a startup budget. We use AI tools to create AI, and we have seen productivity gains. We are speeding up time to market, all because of those AI tools. Our developers, our AI, ML engineers, our architects, they're using base knowledge of AI, but they're using where it took take them months to code something, now can use it with AI, can drastically increase the speed to do that. So absolutely, it's something that should be embraced. And I agree with both your points about sensitivity to cultural change. That's a big part of it. Not only to use AI as part of your normal workflows, but is to just overall for your customer adoption of this. Anticipate that there's going to be disruption, although it's around us. It's pervasive. AI is always talked about, but there's still, when it comes to rolling something out with AI, there's going to be anticipate is some cultural change.
Yeah, I'll echo. Our story's probably pretty similar to Donald's, where you think about what's the hardest and most expensive thing we do as a technology company. It's build technology, like write code, and software engineers and QA folks and designers and all these things. And what we've seen is the leap forward in what's possible in terms of like code generation or kind of just building a work product is it's really more constrained by the people adopting the tools, and like people like their art and their way of doing things. So it's getting the human to change faster than what's possible through the models. And I agree, like I think Anthropic is leading the pack there, and there's other tools that you may have heard of like Cursor and other things that we've found different applications for different AI tool sets to enable that. But on the extreme end, there's the, hey, this is hard and we've been doing things the same way and we're making incremental progress in some teams. And then in other teams, and I'll take HOAI, like our AI first product, which is kind of a fresh kind of blank slate at that. The code we're generating there is more than 95% generated by AI at this point. And so it's kind of, the example that I like to use, and maybe this is a decent analogy, is where we used to have kind of a whole symphony of people playing all these instruments, QA and engineers and designers and all these things, and now this puts a person in kind of the conductor seat to say, hey, this is what we need to do, like let's conduct, and here's my intent. And the speed at which we can move there is pretty inspiring, and it's exciting. And I think for us, like everyone in this room, like we're on the journey. We don't have this figured out at all. But embracing change and agility and like trying to shed all the things that weigh you down from being open to new ideas is kind of the most important thing for us, to be nimble right now and to take advantage of all these things.
Great. Next question's from Emily, table 51.
Hi, thank you. My question is, what will your workforce roles look like for each of your businesses in terms of implementation and customization of your data so the agents work well and get adopted, which you guys have been starting to answer, but I'm kind of curious about your workforce and what team members you need.
Did y'all hear that okay?
Yeah, do you want me to, I can have a pass?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so very, very good question. So on those two fronts, on the workforce front and sort of the data organization front, to take them in turn. So the workforce front, what we've done is we've sort of started off having, different software engineering teams in different parts of the business and even sort of special projects. Be given the freedom to experiment with different sorts of AI tooling to solve their problems in how they get the software developed and the work done. And we're now in a process of consolidating all those learnings and bringing back a point of view as to the best series of tooling and approaches that the business can adopt more broadly, and then we can provide the training and support and culture to the earlier point as well. What we're doing at the same time is we've adopted like market-facing positioning around intelligence everywhere. So what that means to us is that when we go to solve a problem for a customer or build something new, the very first question that teams are asking is, how do I supercharge this with AI? To Morris's earlier point, where does the human need to be in the loop, right? How do we do that and make that a good experience? And yeah, how should this problem be solved differently? And so that's been a bit of a cultural change for us, but we've been able to have that happen by sort of having a little bit of sort of policy and procedure around it. So as these business problems get described, they'll talk to me or the data science team or someone like that, or the Gen AI team or one of these guys, and say, all right, let's look at this with a little bit of a fresh slate. When it comes to the data and the organization side, it's such a good question, because that's like the hardest bit, if that sort of makes sense. Modeling itself isn't all that hard, you know what I mean? If it's a large language model, you can open up ChatGPT and type stuff into it. You can send it over some data and it'll send you some stuff back. Even on the predictive front, like the prediction itself, it's just importing a Python library and running stuff over the top. The bit that's much more difficult is the data and the organization and the cleaning of that data, and also like the clarification and the understanding that you actually need to be able to power some of those agentic flows. Because at the end of the day, these agents are operating on a process and carrying out tasks that otherwise would be done by a person. So without absolutely intimate knowledge of that process and how it's performing and where things are going right or wrong, you just don't have a good foothold to actually begin to automate it or use the AI technology. I know maybe that was a bit of a Weasley answer in terms of how to get the data right, but I'm just saying it's a tricky bit. It's a lot of work, and it's just a little bit of sweat on the forehead, sleeves rolled up, and just really getting stuck in to understand the underlying information.
I'll make a quick comment. I agree 100%. The hard part is the data, and it's probably the most interesting part too. And in terms of like organizing data to contemplate that future, it's again kind of living in the two worlds of our data and how we've thought about data and how you guys have thought about data and how kind of technology platforms have thought about data is all in the context of how do we organize this data in a way that software can interface with it to allow humans to go do something, right? And that's a whole different thing than saying, hey, we have all this data and it needs to be organized and accessible in a way that an agent can interact with it to most efficiently deliver a result. And that might be a very different problem set. And so that's pretty interesting. And so I think our perspective is that the data, like at the end of the day, is truth in some form. Like there's a value that defines something, and then you've got to build these layers that allow humans to interact with the data to get work done, and also appreciate that you have to build a layer to allow AI to interact with that data to deliver results over the long term. And it's super complicated, but it's kind of the fun thing we're all working on. The other half of that question is like, how do we orient the workforce? What does that mean? And I think that I'll just go back again to like trying to create space and the expectation that experimentation and agility is probably the most valuable thing we have right now. And I think it just the more we can encourage our folks to experiment frequently and be willing to change our minds frequently and be okay with sunk cost of things in the past that used to make sense but don't make sense anymore, I think that's a valuable thing as we kind of arm our workforce for that future.
I don't know if a lot of the people that are texting in questions are to summarize basically saying what happens to all the people. And I think that this question sort of addressed it. But I don't know. I know, Morris, you've talked nationally, internationally about this a lot. And I mean, I know you're looking at this mainly from healthcare, which is different than a lot of other industries. But I think that is the question on a lot of people's minds is what happens to the jobs of today, to the employees of today?
Go for it, Morris.
Yeah, there's they'll need to be able to, the people will still be there, because I mentioned earlier, human in the loop is such a vital part of what we do. It's certainly, there's probably need to diversify their responsibilities and job training. We've noticed that looking for certain roles, that the responsibilities of that role has shifted, the titles themselves have shifted, new roles have been created, which, by the way, if anybody has any kids who are undecided on their career, being a prompt engineer is a really sustainable job choice. That's going to be taking off. But again, looking through the lens of through healthcare, AI is not going to supplant the human in that same process. We still need humans to take care of patients. Where AI will be there to accelerate and make those humans more efficient. So that's, from, again, like you mentioned, that's from my perspective what we see, and yeah, that's just healthcare though.
Yeah, well, very, very similar, I think, in financial services, in that what we'll see, what the term we use internally is like a force multiplier for the banker. So, and sort of like the mental model is to automate, a lot of the boring stuff, like, so we've got one where they, when they get an email from customer with 20 different PDFs that they need to apply for the loan, and they have to go in all different parts of the trust structure and be categorized, now they'll sort of just drag them into nCino, and it'll use the AI and figure out where everything needs to go. So dragging and dropping 20 documents and navigating through a website to put them in the right spot, that's kind of boring. Like, bankers don't really like doing that, as you may imagine. But they often do like spending time with customers, So I think what you'll find is, exactly as Morris said, I think it'll be more of a profile shift in how people spend their day, rather than like a dramatic, economic transformation in terms of all these roles not needing to be done. Having that said, there's probably a degree of efficiency release with the technology, but that was true of the loom. It's been true for a very long time. But I think the technology will be revolutionary. I think the impact on the workforce will be more of a mindset and a profile change.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think this is as more and more people and businesses lean more into AI, I think this is the question. This is the thing that even if people are leaning in and excited and getting all the efficiency, this is the scary big thing in the back of everyone's mind, and I think it's the right thing to be thinking about. I think, well, one, I'll share, I'm incredibly optimistic about how all of this will play out. I think there's a bunch of points of view that, and valid, points on the other side, but I'm incredibly optimistic about it. I think that generally what we've seen so far, and as best we can predict, I think AI will radically enhance human connection rather than replace it. I think what it will replace is, dragging and dropping and doing things that's not human connection, that's work. It's just effort, it's a process. And so I really believe that it will truly enable a greater enhancement of human connection, not replacing it. To the point though, in the question, and I think everyone kind of dances around it, will jobs be destroyed by a radically disruptive new technology? Absolutely, for sure, and that's happened with the Industrial Revolution, or the printing press, or the loom, or the internet, right? But what I'm optimistic about, and I think we can learn a lot from history, and history doesn't always repeat itself, but it often rhymes, and so I think every time that's happened, there's been job destruction, or less people are needed to accomplish the same task, but there's enormous new things that spring out of that, new industries, new jobs, and new opportunities. And I mean, I'll use a very maybe polarizing example, but the job of an influencer didn't exist 30 years ago, but good Lord, you talk to a teenager and everyone wants to be an influencer now. It's wow. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but that sure didn't exist before social media and the iPhone. So that's kind of my, maybe not influencers, but that's my optimistic view, is that, yeah, this is going to change the efficiency of how we get work done traditionally, but there's a whole new world of possibilities and new things that people will be able to do that they want to do, that they, that didn't exist before. And the last, I guess my last comment on that is what becomes valuable then in that future, like what's the differentiator? And I think in the past, like in all of our lifetimes, the differentiator of like what do you chase and what's most valuable in an employee is intelligence. Like you go to school and you learn and you get higher education, you get certifications and you learn more stuff, and more intelligence is higher pay and all these things. And I think that's what kind of gets democratized a little bit, or commoditized with AI, is we've got an amazing amount of intelligence in AI, but we don't have empathy in AI, or we don't have agency. And so I think that's the new differentiator for folks in this kind of new era, is high agency people with empathy who can really make human connections and think critically about things. So that's kind of how I think that's my optimistic answer to what happens to the people.
Okay. Next question's from Christine, table 52.
Good morning, thank you. All of your businesses are managing either personal and or financial data management. How can we trust that AI security when data breaches are still so common? I just had a friend who just had her bank account breached. What measures are being taken to ensure that AI doesn't become another vulnerability? And how do we hold companies accountable for securing AI-driven systems?
So I can just speak from the nCino example, but it's just such a powerful question, maybe the most powerful question as far as the nCino business goes, because when you want to provide the bank operating system for the Bank of America, you can bet your bottom dollar they are coming in and making sure every single T is crossed, I is dotted on every single line of code as far as the security profile goes. From a governance perspective, our Chief Information Security Officer reports to the CEO and sits on the leadership team. We've more recently, with an AI perspective, I guess, brought into being a separate data leadership team that comprises all of the members of the executive, and any decision that has any question of risk whatsoever with respect to any data, goes through that to be understood and properly reviewed. It's a really powerful question. It's one we talk about a lot internally, perhaps a little bit similar to my previous answer. When it comes to information security in general, trust is the big word. You really want to be, if you're giving over very private data to a third party, you're just going to be more and more protected if that entity has got a good name and reputation.
Yeah, for us, it's data governance and data privacy, data sovereignty. All those are very important topics. All things we need to address head on. One of the things for data security, since we're dealing with personal health information here, is that, well, first of all, I'm a firm believer that if it's every patient should have access to their own data. Everyone. It should not be withheld, should be stored away somewhere where it's inaccessible. So what we use is we're employing blockchain. And blockchain, if you're unfamiliar, essentially decentralizes the data so that it's in pieces. And that once it's on blockchain, it can't be changed, and it can't, more than one person needs to have access to it. It's like needing 2 keys to launch a nuke kind of thing. You need more than 2 keys. So that's one approach. Also, because we're dealing with multiple countries, sometimes the data within those countries are not allowed to leave the country's borders. So what do we do then? We've explored things. Well, it can't be, if it's cloud-based, then it has to be a cloud where the servers are within the country's borders. Do we explore on-prem solutions? That's more costly. Or do we explore a third contingency like federated learning? What that means is basically that the algorithm is stored locally on edge devices or on a chip instead of sending it to the cloud. This came up when we're talking about military use cases. When warfighters in the forward area cannot leave a digital signature or signal. How do we able to analyze their health information, their health data locally? We do it through federated learning. So those kind of, think of it different approaches, but that's a roundabout way of answering your question about, how do I ensure that, cyber attacks and different breaches of data, how can I ensure that my data is protected? And the question that came up at last conference I was at was, who's watching the watcher? That's a valid question. And I was on a panel with somebody from the FDA, and they said, well, we are. Doesn't give much of us a lot of confidence, but so the short answer is there's some vulnerabilities, obviously, but we do everything we can, every technology that we know of today, like blockchain ledgers, to help ensure that privacy.
Yeah, I think well said by both, and I think our approach has been similar, very similar to Donald's example at Encino. I think there's a couple layers of this. One, as a provider, like taking that role really seriously and understanding that it's kind of a zero error tolerance game, right? Especially folks, whether you're dealing with patient data or financial data in our case, like there isn't room for like we mostly get it right. So we've got to have the right approach as providers. I think as consumers, understanding what you're worried about with the data, because like not all data is equal, right? It's one thing if it's your medical history and all the things, or it's your financial data and access to your bank account. It's another if it's like, there's certain things that, it isn't as high stakes, and just understanding, what your your hierarchy of things that you're worried about are. And I think if we zoom way out, like the markets are a great kind of scorekeeper and decider of what works here. At the end of the day, you think about if we can go back again, like go back in time 20 years ago, and if I said, hey, this is 2005, I want you're going to take out your phone and text in where you want to go, and a stranger's going to show up in their car, and you're going to get in, and you don't talk to them, and they're going to take you, and then drop you off, and like someone's going to go take money out of your bank account and pay them. That, like, cool, right? That seems insane. That's crazy. But like we all do that all the time now, and it seems crazy to call a cab. Like that seems so. Like, what is that? And I think that's the markets playing. Like there was a lot of stuff to figure out. Mistakes were probably made. Were definitely made along the way. But like the markets figured out a solution there, and it changed all of our behavior over time. And now I would feel much less secure calling a local cab company to go get in a ride rather than saying, hey, I'm putting my trust in this application who has solved this at scale and has kind of built my trust over years and years of using it, and I'll hop in an Uber and take the ride now. So I think that like we're just at the beginning of that, where it's weird and it's new, and it's on all these companies to get it right, and there will be people who get it wrong, and they'll be like the markets will punish those folks, and they'll fail. But the ones who do prove the ability to be competent and get it right will change the way that we all interact with our data or get work done.
So to switch gears a little bit, I know Morris has an idea around this. You're seeing a lot of communities, a lot of countries investing a ton in AI to get more companies like these in their regions. So what do you think the Wilmington area should be thinking about right now to either to help your businesses or to help attract the talent or other companies here so Wilmington prospers as AI continues to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. Wilmington is an area ripe for innovation, especially with AI. We already have examples of that with Encino being it can be a tech hub, it can be AI-centric for healthcare and other verticals in the Southeast. We can be a leader in that based here. And we have proximity to research from the Triangle. So there are many things that makes this, and to top that off, this is not a bad place to hang your hat. So recruiting tech talent, but more importantly, retaining that tech talent is going to be a challenge. But if there's more collaborative effort and more acceptance of AI into our respective businesses, absolutely we can be a leader in that here. I would love to eventually be able to build a data center right here, to be able to bring all that in and have multiple companies contribute to that. So that's the dream, and I want to reference there was an article that Jim Roberts sent me. Jim, wherever you are, thanks, from a Techstars investor that's looking at the health tech startups in 2025, and it's not about companies that just rewrite or improve on algorithms anymore. It's basically providing care to all those that need it, and we have an ability to have a globalization of that, but a local impact. So I think it can happen right here.
Well, I only been here 6 months, so. No, look, one, obviously, I was talking with Ben before, but we just find it a fantastic environment for growing a technology company. Obviously, the UNCW being there is a huge help. We think there's an amazing talent pool here. We do partner with some big universities around the country a little bit, and find that's a really great way to get highly talented people into the company. But yeah, particular reflections on Wilmington as a business environment, I might leave it at that.
My answer has evolved over time. I actually think the best thing Wilmington can do in this kind of era and in this age to support things like, companies embracing AI and building AI and all these things is by being a tremendous place to live and raise a family and work. I think that's maybe the most important thing. You can kind of do these jobs anywhere, and like our team, the majority of our team is here in Wilmington, and I think loves living here and loves being able to raise a family here and all the kind of lifestyle benefits that it complements their work. And I think that's really amazing. And I think Wilmington's always done that well, but I think it's even more important than ever before. And then, to the other points, there's so many really good kind of programs that may not be obvious to everyone in place. There's things like the Tech Talent Collaborative and so much work with UNCW to like bring people and upskill them into these roles and like create opportunities. And the more success stories of companies building here then give other entrepreneurs confidence to either come here to build or to have kind of a green shoot off of another company and go build something. And I think the more of those stories we can stack up and then just continue to maintain and improve Wilmington as an amazing place to live and work and raise a family, I think that's the most important thing to me.
Good. Next question, table 16, Tony.
Good morning. I've worked in a few different fields, accounting, commercial banking, academia, and I've used a few of these different models. The ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Grok 3 is a pretty good one right now. What I've noticed is depending on the application, what you're doing, certain tasks seem to be better performed by certain models. Are your businesses using GPT exclusively? Are you exploring the other ones? And what do you kind of think about that? To me, especially if you need creativity, then a different one might be much better than another. So that's it.
I'll take a quick stab at that. Yeah. So all of the above and in very different applications. There's tool sets and models that we use to empower our own employee productivity, whether that's writing and creative or design or any of these things. And there's things that we use to generate our own code. And then there's models that our product connects and interfaces with to deliver our services and the things that we build. And even within that, it's not one or the other. Like I'll pick two of the biggest that we use, and we have the ability to kind of differentiate based on the type of work that's being done between like names that everyone's familiar with. OpenAI and Anthropic both have really great kind of foundational frontier models, and being able to understand what type of work is being done. Is this a sequential kind of decision-making thing, or is this more creative and reasoning? Like we'll branch those types of workflows into different areas and utilize models in different ways. So I think it's very much not a one-size, like there isn't one answer yet. Could there be in the future? Maybe, we don't know. I mean, that's kind of the like, if we want to get weird and talk about AGI, artificial general intelligence, like there isn't a real definition around that. It's like saying a supercomputer. Like, what is a supercomputer? It's whatever you decide it is. But maybe in the future, one model becomes so powerful that it can do all those things, but that day's not today, and there certainly is benefit to having kind of forked processing here.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's definitely not a one model fits all, at least not right now. I hope there isn't a one model fits all. Like, we have different use cases for different things. Like for our natural language processing, for us, the most trustworthy AI model is going to be Anthropic's Claude. We've looked at other ones, we've studied other ones, and we found that Claude works best for us. There's subsets of LLMs like BERT and Clinical BERT and MedPalms and all those things that we've looked at to compare. And we're also employing kind of first in world techniques like double fusion and all those things. So there's different opportunities for different models. We also, for outside of modeling, we also consider things like cloud architecture and scalable cloud. We're designing everything on AWS now, but we could transition to Azure. And there's things about AWS I want to bring over to Azure. So there's just, it's a better approach, maybe best practice, to do this patchwork type of strategy rather than just to say, all right, I want to pick one and go with that. I think two of my colleagues, I don't know, Donald, if you're going to bring it up, but I'll point it out, like there's the Chinese models, the DeepSeeks and the Kimmys and other things. What are they doing, and how are they going to get into the mix? So those are considerations that we should think about in evaluating which is the best fit for our businesses.
Yeah, it's great answers, and certainly would agree with all of that, though maybe the Chinese models, we're not quite getting too deeply into it at the moment. But yeah, look, I guess I'd sort of answer the question from two different halves a little bit. So when it comes to using AI to like accelerate nCino's operations in our business, like how we do things, what we do largely, where I find sort of the largest determinant of it is, how the software is built and what's around it, rather than the large language model itself. So whether you're looking at the earlier example of Cursor, Figma's doing really cool stuff on design in terms of plugging in AI, we're selecting those sorts of applications which just, our engineers are telling us, wow, I can see in my numbers, I'm processing 30% more story points a week and all this sort of thing. So that's a little bit experiential in terms of the selection of the technology. But when it comes to the underlying model itself, number one, we're a little bit perhaps like Morris, we host these models ourselves on AWS Bedrock, which means we've got a lot of flexibility to spin up and change between different models depending on their profile. In fact, just a few days ago, Claude 3.7 came out, the new Anthropic one, and I don't know if it's quite one model to rule them all, but it's pretty bloody good. But so what we do is, a lot of what we do when we're doing it, when we're automating processes in banking, is it's not so much like a creative process, as it were, but like take the example I gave before where, PDFs get uploaded and you need to understand what that PDF is so that then you can open up the right places and put the documents in the right spot. That's like, even though you're using, as I mentioned before, like a non-deterministic large language model, it's something that has a right answer. The document went in the right spot or it didn't. So what we do is we've developed with our data scientists like a whole ton of testing and testbed technology that allows us to throw hundreds of thousands of examples into all the variants of the different models so that we can evaluate the degree of accuracy. The other one, of course, is cost. Like some of these models aren't cheap. Like if you're putting them on really big workflows and all that sort of thing, where you've got a lot of data being thrown at them, gee, it stacks up. There's hosting, there's the model itself, there's a fair bit. So it's an interesting balance. And look, I mean, the main thing I agree with from the previous answers is it's not one size fits all. It's really dependent on the application.
One quick follow-on. You said two things that I think are really interesting. One is just the rate of change of new stuff, like Claude 3.7 just days ago, and DeepSeek pretty recently. And if you go back even a little further, like some of the O1 like reasoning models that are, like, it's not just like a linear thing. Like it's exponentially improving at a pretty crazy rate, and the cost is real. Like that's what I think a lot of people don't appreciate, is just this is quite compute intensive and expensive still to do some of the really frontier stuff. But I think for all of us, certainly if you're in technology and building on top of this, but even if you're trying to embrace kind of consumer facing or business facing kind of products, the most cutting edge thing that you could do and probably should do is spend a lot of your time using and building and investing in things that don't quite make sense yet. Like they're a little too expensive, like, hey, we're maybe losing a little money on this, or like this business model doesn't quite make sense yet, or it's like this has promise but it doesn't quite work, because it will. It will work in 6 months or 12 months, and not like positioning for that is I think a little bit short-sighted. It's these kind of scaling laws continue to hold, and that's pretty exciting.
I'd just sort of come in on that just with a couple of quick points. So I think that's really well put by Ben. I guess I'd sort of, my slight tilt on it is, rather than doing that one thing that isn't there yet, but you think could be really, really promising in the future, I'd try and take on 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Just because with that uncertain future of AI, with how much is being developed, there's just a lot of uncertainty, and you just don't know exactly what thing is going to be the thing that changes the world. So I think a little bit of diversification isn't such a bad idea in light of that. The other thing I'd say is Ben talked about that sort of expanding exponential of how powerful the technology is getting, and every single month, you're seeing these models being able to do things that they couldn't even do a few months ago, and going into entirely different spaces. That's all absolutely true. I hope it continues. Maybe it'll slow down. Who knows? Okay. But even if there was no further advance of the technology, let's say Claude 3.7 was the last one. There's no 3.8, okay, an equivalent on ChatGPT and the rest of them. You'd still see, even with what's just there now, the amount of economic value that can be extracted from it, from the economy, is still 1,000 times what it is now. You've got this continually growing technology, but you've got like an ability for that to do things in the economy it's not already doing, is absolutely massive as well. So it's a good space.
We've got time for one more question, and Morris started to answer this, or gave one answer to it before when he was talking about how students today should consider careers as prompt engineers. So if you think about the people in this room today, 5 years from now, what do you think they would wish they had done today to prepare themselves for what AI may become?
That's a big question. The future is now. No, so yeah, I think if we agree with and align with what Ray Kurzweil says, by 2035 we should reach a singularity event, right? So AI and humans become one. That's really scary, and it's 10 short years away. But I think that, look, AI is here, it's here to stay. And I think my other panelists have mentioned that it is definitely, we've given examples of how we've shown both economic gains and productivity gains and health outcome gains. So it's here for us to fully embrace. There's a kind of linking to a previous question about labor. There is in healthcare, there's a significant labor shortage. And one of the main contributing factors to that labor shortage is provider burnout. And the reasons that provider burnout exists is because they are spending too much time in tasks. Like last time you go to your doctor, how much time do they actually spend with you versus their back turned to you, typing away at medical charts in a computer? And for them to get to the right answer quicker, they need to be spending more time interrogating you, the patient, and rather than charting and doing other administrative tasks. So AI has an opportunity to automate those workflows. And in the small examples we've shown that, it's already drastically improved labor retention for within healthcare. So I think just everyone sitting here, that there's, with everyone with whom we talked about today, AI is certainly going to improve our lives in more ways than one, and I'm excited about that.
Yes. Look, I mean, I got, But my answer relates a little bit to a previous one before, where if I can characterize the question as, sort of looking ahead 10 years, what would be the thing that you wish you did right now and the investments that you made in business right now? To me, like there's a bunch of answers. You could sort of think, well, you can sort of get a sense of what's going to be automated in like the next year or two, and sort of like invest less in those areas that might go away, attract, talent into your business that are, forward thinking, using the technology, quite creative and applying it in different applications. I think there's some truth to those sorts of things. But the big one, the 99% in my mind at least, is understand and organize your data, per the previous question. Just really understanding how the information flows through your business, having the right people within your business be able to understand, I guess, like statistical relationships, but more like, that sort of the function of how the business works from a numerical and text perspective as well. And getting that clean, good, going into a nice data platform or wherever you're putting it, really makes you quite future-proof, because all these agents, these tools, these models of all different sorts of flavors, they only sort of create value in business when they're talking to and understanding how your business creates value. So being able to speak to that elegantly with just nice, clean, well understood data is just a good thing to get right.
So the question was, for the folks in this room, what do they wish they would have known or done today 5 years from now? Like looking back. So I'll look a little further out than that, and I'll share a quote from maybe a polarizing figure, but Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, and his quote that I think is probably at least directionally right. It's hard to know exactly what will be, but the quote is, in 10 years, every person will be more capable than the most capable person is today. And so just think about that, I think, for a second. Think about that. If every single person is more capable than the most capable person is today, in this room, in the world, period. I think that's really interesting. Capable is a tough word there, so that's maybe the one issue I'd take, is maybe more intelligent, or know more things, or have access to answer more information. So I think that's like the stage that I'd probably say, one, just appreciate that is some version of that. Maybe it's not exactly true, or maybe it is more than true, but appreciate that that's the case, and then kind of organize activities and how far you lean into that future. I think that's probably the thing that I think everyone would want to appreciate, is like, oh my goodness, that's where we're going. I'll share one more quote, and I guess this is a dangerous thing to do in Wilmington, North Carolina. Is another polarizing figure. I'm going to quote Coach K, so get ready if you're a Heels fan. But I heard this recently, and I think this is, again, for everyone in this room, this is maybe more practical kind of things that we all wish we would do. And the Coach K quote, and he was talking about one and done recruiting, not AI, but I think it's applicable. So Coach K said, "I am not a world-class predictor, but I am a world-class reactor." So it's okay in my mind. He couldn't have predicted, in the Coach K example, he couldn't have predicted one and done and recruiting and folks going to the NBA. But once that was the case, he accepted that was reality, and then organized around it and won big, right? And so I think for all of us, it's okay if we can't predict the future and exactly what's going to happen, and what is the next right model and what should we use. But I think we should just be willing to react to the world around us and to new information, and to be agile. And I think if we all could, time travel 5 years forward, we'd say, hey, I wish we would have all reacted a little faster to new information. And so I would just, I think that'd be my suggestion there.
I have one more quick one, Rob, if I could. So I think many of us have all had wished that we would have invested in NVIDIA now, or Apple or OpenAI stock. 10 years from now, that same wish we were trying to get.
Nice.
Well, let's please have a round of applause for our panel. Thank you all for attending, and to quote Ben, that we should do things to make this a tremendous place to live. I hope all of you can join us at Feast Wilmington starting March 24th. Thank you.